The public has seen former President Jacob Zuma for the first time since his arrest when he joined virtual proceedings from Estcort prison in his arms deal corruption matter. Zuma's lawyers want his case postponed, saying the virtual hearing doesn't meet the test of a fair trial. But the prosecution is arguing that Mr. Zuma is playing for time. Let's take you to Newzroom Afrika's news editor Diane Hawker. She's live in Pietermaritzburg for us tonight. Diane, firstly, let's talk about the fact that it's the first time that we're seeing the former president, at least since his incarceration, and it forms part of the reason why his legal team has brought this argument for a postponement, saying the conditions within the prison, or at least him having the trial from there, are simply not conducive.
Yes, absolutely, Kathy. The Zuma legal team were quite spirited in their argument this morning and this afternoon about the issue of his case being heard virtually. We saw him logged onto that hearing wearing what I think now has become his signature red tie that we've seen him wearing oftentimes when he comes to court. But the difference, of course, was that Zuma was not sitting in the courtroom, but rather in a room at that Estcort correctional facility. And the crux of the argument really was about whether that should actually be the case. His lawyers arguing that he should have been present in court if the matter is to go ahead, and the prosecution saying that since the argument is mainly going to be made on court papers, as well as sort of legal arguments dealing with case law, that there was no need for Zuma to be present in court. Kathy?
So when it comes to this issue of oral evidence, there seems to be a change in as far as the position of, the former president's legal team is concerned, and at least an indication that there could well be oral arguments that the former president wants to put before the court.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, it's one of the issues that Judge Pitkun asked the Zuma team about, just to explain what had actually changed, because the last time when these proceedings were heard, there was sort of an understanding that that they would proceed on the basis of papers, and that the argument would be listed in heads of argument, and then the lawyers would essentially have a debate amongst themselves. But now the Zuma legal team has said that they don't only want that legal debate amongst lawyers, and they've indicated that the former president intends to lead oral evidence. They're saying that from the point that the former president Jacob Zuma actually pleaded to the offences, that should be counted as the start of the trial, and that he's entitled to be present in court for every hearing physically from that point onward. But they're also saying that he intends to argue or to lead evidence himself. The prosecution are saying that it's a ruse, essentially, from the Zuma camp. They're saying that he's playing for time, essentially, and that they're trying to delay the case, a case that has been delayed already for several years. The prosecution, we also heard, saying that Zuma is trying to use this opportunity to essentially put members of the MPA, former and present, on trial for how it was that the case actually didn't end up beginning those many years ago. Kathy?
Diane, you were telling us earlier that the Pietermaritzburg High Court is closed. Most of its matters have been postponed. So if we are then to take the argument of this matter being heard in a courtroom, unlikely that that will be anytime soon, given the lockdown restrictions.
Yes, absolutely. And it's actually a combination of two things, Kathy. The lockdown restrictions is one aspect. However, the registrar of this court actually submitted a letter which it gave to all the lawyers practicing at this court, saying that due to the unrest that had taken place in the province, that the court would be closed from Monday until Wednesday at least, and that only urgent matters would be heard at this court. Now, the Zuma team is saying that in fact is reason enough for this case to be postponed at least by 3 weeks. They are arguing that it wouldn't prejudice the former president in any way, and also saying that it wouldn't prejudice the NPA in any way, since there's already been a lengthy delay, but also making the point that other cases have also been postponed at this court. So they are saying that Zuma is being treated different to other accused who are also having their cases heard at this court, but for the reasons set out in that letter, those trials are not continuing at this stage. Now, of course, Judge Pitt Kun has quite a difficult night ahead, because he did indicate that he's going to give that decision tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. He said he might not give reasons, but he will have an answer for the different legal teams. And we'll all be watching and waiting in anticipation for that outcome, Kathy.
Let's talk about the implications of his ruling. So if, for example, he decides to not grant the postponement, one would imagine Advocate Dalimpofu would be looking at what other options, avenues might be available to him and his client, especially if he strongly believes, as we saw in today's argument, that it would be an infringement on his client's rights for this matter to be held virtually.
Yes, absolutely, Kathy. I think that if the Zuma legal team is not successful in this particular application, we could see them elevating this to a higher court, particularly since they've raised a rights issue. And ultimately, the Constitutional Court would be the final court to actually deal with such a rights issue. They are talking about his rights as an accused, saying that, in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, he has the right to be present in a hearing like this. And they're also saying that the rights of accused, regardless of the situation, shouldn't actually be infringed on, because this is the one opportunity that you actually have to defend yourself and ensure that you are not incarcerated unfairly. So based on what we've seen previously, I would imagine that the Zuma legal team will want to use all the legal avenues available to them, including continuing with this matter if they are unsuccessful to a higher court. Kathy?
Well, I suppose, Diane, it's no longer surprising to see the different legal avenues and ways in which this case can actually unfold. And we haven't even gotten to the nub of the issue here, which is the actual trial around the corruption charges that are being brought against the former president and, of course, arms company Thales.
Yes, absolutely, Kathy. And to be quite honest, looking at the heads of argument, even in the matter involving whether the prosecutor, Billy Downer, should be in the case, that's a special plea being brought by the former president, Jacob Zuma. Even that case is likely to take some time to be dealt with. The heads of argument in that matter for the Zuma side are about 150 pages, 84 pages of heads of argument from the NPA, in which they state a lengthy background on how we got to this point, starting in 2001 with Billy Downer actually joining that legal team. They're also obviously dealing with different legal issues as to what a prosecutor should be doing and whether a prosecutor should be partial or impartial, some of which we actually heard debated briefly today. Advocate Dalimpofu was actually quite unhappy with that, but Vim Chengrove chose to bring that in as part of his argument of why this should continue. So even if this matter is postponed for that 3 weeks and then it does eventually get underway, the true crux of the case will have to wait until that special plea is dealt with by the court. And depending on which way that goes, we could still be coming back to Pietermaritzburg for quite some time, Kathy.
Newzroom Afrika News editor Diane Hawker. Let's leave it there for tonight. So